All right, hello. My name is Daniel Guys. I'm the creative and technical director here at ED Films. Just doing another live stream here today as I work on this painting. I was just out for a little bit, and I decided I would stream again and kind of go through this process of trying to find the art style or the visual aesthetic approach for this film. Um, I think what would be interesting really quickly is just to take a look at some of the art references for this project. I'm going to see if I've got some. Can't recall, and hopefully the references that I have are PG and safe. You never really know, honestly. Let's see here. I'm just going to go back to this project here. I should have a folder for reference. Here we go. And under art. Now, hopefully everything's PG. Yep, everything's safe. You never know. Hey, Pachelovic, welcome back to the stream. To the new stream. This is the new stream. It's the second stream. Let me know if you can see everything okay and everything's all right. Going to continue what we were doing earlier. I actually came back for a change when I said I would. So what I'm going to look at really quick is just some style references to what this project is. A little bit of my inspiration for it is Andrew Wyeth. Andrew Wyeth is an illustrator who was pretty, I guess, like pretty big in the 50s, 40s, and 50s, I suppose. Um, so it is a point of reference, a lot to do with the colors and even the overall approach for the aesthetic. There's something I really like about Andrew Wyeth's mix between high detail and low detail. Um, so these are some of my favorites here. I'm not sure. I don't think this film will achieve the level of looseness. These are more of my favorite stuff. Some of his other stuff got really highly detailed, like little things like this. Most of these scenes are fairly wintry. Um, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with. I feel like this really is a good representation of the winter scenes, but the summer scenes I'm not quite sure about how I'm going to go about that. But anyways, there's something I really like about Andrew Wyeth's these ones, especially this mix of detail with really vast empty spaces, and that mostly only happens in his winter work because you've got this page showing, which I feel like I'll definitely do in the winter for this film. Hopefully, I'll be able to achieve that. Not sure how to handle it with the grass, but what I wanted to do is try to capture some of that in this painting. And one way we could go about it is, I mean, I could start black and white. Andrew Wyeth's paintings, the ones at least that I was looking at, have a lot of tinting of like a yellowish color. Let's go and grab one, and we'll just grab one that's sort of similar to where we're going. This is probably more of the time of year we're going for, but it's very yellow. I'm going to see if I can just pull this in. I don't think I can. I can just copy and paste it. There, that worked. Let's shift the color over. I'm just going to shift the color range a little bit and get a sense of maybe desaturate it a little. Kind of there, something along there. Bleakly colored film. So right now our film is this is very blue, but there is something very monochromatic about this, which I'm not sure if I actually like or not. But we can just go through a little bit more. A lot of these colors will be terrible because they were pulled from the internet, and the internet can be images can be very awful. This one has a little more interesting colors in it. Okay, let's put that one, this one. Maybe we'll put them in the back. Weird, it's weird how they changed color. Oh, it's this thing. Isn't that supposed to be on the... Get rid of that. Okay, that was brightening everything up. All right, so let's have a look. Let's see what we're doing. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure about the color of things. So because I'm not so certain about the color, I'll focus on the grayscale composition mostly. So if we look at this, if I throw it down, we can look at the values, the value range that we'll be trying to go for, I suppose. What's interesting about some of these images is that oftentimes in landscapes, your value, your values will go from, oops, your foreground objects will typically be a lot darker. So in here, you would be quite dark in this area. Although, I mean, this is grassy plains, but what's interesting about this is it's kind of the opposite. You know, like this area is very dark, and this area here is the brightest. This area and this area, the sky and the foreground are the brightest. There's a little area of light right here and coming through, tying everything together. It's a really nice composition. He seems to do that a lot. Like if you look at this, very bright in the foreground, and things tend to get darker as they go into the distance. Obviously, they're lower contrast than the bird in the front, who's probably the darkest element. But it's interesting because it is something I'm trying to get my head around with this specific image or style. Is I have usually favored going dark as I get closer. So a lot of this stuff would be silhouetted, or there might be a lot of really dark silhouetted things framing everything. But this is very light in the foreground. That might be something interesting to experiment with that I haven't really done yet in my own work. So we can just take a look at that and try to play with it a little bit. So that being said, we'll work in color for now because it's a little more fun. But I'm still not sure what those colors are going to be. We've started doing the grasses and everything else. Let's see what I want to. I'm going to start getting rid of any layers that don't have anything on them. Usually I'm a little better with naming things, but I'm trying to just move along and not get too caught up in the details. So we'll just take this as a grass layer. Now you don't have to, like you could just use, for this kind of stuff, you could just block things in without trying to do anything specific. But I feel like we've kind of done that with these 3D objects. Things are sort of blocked in, but I'm going to just go through really quickly. I don't really care about this grass right now. I just sort of drew it for fun. So let's do this. This is the ground. Okay, so we have some foreground. Now, do we want to go light with the foreground, which we could do with little accents of dark? Is there anything, I'm just going to double check if there's anything in our references that have like a dark element cutting through the front. See, a lot of his darks are just not in the foreground, at least on these specific paintings. There's some stuff there. Let's have a look. This is one of my favorites, for sure. Okay. Looks like it's going to be a quiet stream. Definitely have to figure out what color I'm going to be putting everything. Right now I'm just playing a little bit with what's there. So what'll be cool is we'll bring in here. This would be sort of a shadowed area here, shadowed pocket. I'm just kind of copying this for now. Later. And then this would be a really light area here. I suppose for me the real question is I mean, not the real question, but I don't really know yet what season we're going for here. I also don't know specifically if I'm going to have color in this film other than the skies and whatever else. Okay. So we do have some like interesting areas of lights and darks we're looking at here. Like this area here is like our light. We would make this our lightest, including the character. And then a couple little highlights here and there. I'm just pulling colors straight from the painting, even though the painting probably doesn't have accurately good colors. But I'm just going to pull some things from here and there. I really probably should avoid real colors of any kind, because most of the film, if you look at the character, she's very black and white. She has a slight warm tint to her based on the paper, just coming from the paper itself. So I got to be careful. I'm not sure how to manage the colors yet, but right now, like I was saying, we'll just block in and kind of get a feel for things. That's like a little highlight. What's cool about this is I know that just by I'm doing this really quick, sturdy sketch, but what I'll be able to do after, just because I'm just working it right now, so I'll be able to put like little patches here and there. Like this may be little, let's actually just do this. We'll go here like this. This would be like a little patch of grass. I want to get a nice blend of different colors. Well, not colors, but values anyways. So I'm going to jump between these various brushes, just playing with the look of it. Oh. That's a very weird brush. Weird. What did I do to this thing? Looks weird. Let's reset that. Did I do something weird to it? Don't know. It's odd now. Okay. Anyways, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just need to get some colors and shapes in there. So let's just get them in. So really want to experiment with contrast. And as you can see, I'm just painting over this structure, using it as a guide. Because probably a lot of this you won't even be able to see, because once we get the rocks and stuff in there, and sorry, all the grass, it won't be that visually legible. So let's grab a little more grass. This is kind of a tiny grass patch. I'm going to go 0, shift 0. Make it 100% opaque. Now, it doesn't show very well against that sky color. We'll probably have to shift the sky color a little bit. Let's just go like this. So here I'm just going to go lasso, and I'll just draw a line along here. And go like this. Burp. Really quick and dirty. It's not meant to be good right now. We're just trying to get a feel for things. And I don't know, like I said, what that feel is. We're going to figure that out. And this might be like some dark grass in front. Let's see. Got so many little grass types. Okay. Doot. I suppose I should make sure the grass is getting smaller as it gets further away. Okay. This would be like a little patch here. I mean, really we're dealing with like quite a bit of grass. I mean, it's the prairies after all. Let me just check. Hopefully, I'm going to go back to my references again, my image references. And again, hopefully we're all PG here. I'm not sure. I have the town I took pictures of. This is one of the original towns that the part of the story is based in. You can see like there's a lot of grass there, obviously. Why can't I move images unless I'm fully zoomed out? This is the actual town of Harry Hill. Sort of like the landscape looks like this. It's a very small image and fuzzy, but you get this lots of really thick grass, especially brown in the winter and stuff like that. I might copy this image. It's a terrible quality image, but it doesn't matter. And we'll put it down here as an additional reference. When I was learning concepts, I went and took I took a night course on concept art, digital concept art, which, by the way, I did terribly in. One of the techniques that the teacher would use is something called Smart Blur. And he would use that to just get rid of detail on stuff. So by using a pretty high radius, what you can do is it helps you break up the areas of interest. So you can see that it's simplified this painting quite a bit. And makes it a little bit easier to work with as far as recognizing what values and stuff are. So for this, we can grab can give us an idea without getting lost in all the details. The other nice thing about this is it simplifies, if you're looking for color, it simplifies the selection process on the colors, because if you look at this here, we go really close, even though it's very pixelated, there's quite a dramatic variation of colors in between each one of these pixels, right? And so that can make it very, very unpredictable what color you're going to grab when you're actually, when you're grabbing a color. And then here we've generalized the colors. They're a lot more closer together. So again, you're going to get something that's a bit easier to reference and a bit easier to use. So we might use this as a reference. Let's, we could possibly do that to this painting too. However, this painting is a little bit more for the reference of the feel of things. And again, like I'm trying to catch that vibe a little bit. Mostly, I really like the ink and the paper vibe. So let's keep going with this. So we've got some colors coming in, which maybe are good for the film. I have no idea. We're figuring this out. I thought I had this film figured out in some ways, but it was more theoretical than absolute. So we'll just go in here and we'll just do a few more things. So if I wanted to, I guess I could, one thing I could do if I wanted to add these little grass patches is I could go like this and then just erase away little parts. I mean, that's another big thing for the concept art toolbox is using your eraser as much as you use your brush even. I like how there's some certain parts where there's almost this white grass, which is cool. What you sort of see here, you really don't see it here. This is wild grass here. All this stuff in here is wild. This is grass that has been, this is not even grass, this is a crop of some kind. So this level of manicure is really rare when you go to like the more wild areas, which is where this film is supposed to be based. So what might be more interesting here is maybe we push this more into the oranges and the browns right here, which we can do just by pressing Control U, and we can actually adjust this more and put it into more that range. Is that better? I'm not sure. Not sure. I'm on the fence about it. But for now, again, let's avoid getting too detailed for now and try to see what we can get here. Because I'm no master of color, we'll just sort of put this together and we'll see what happens. So one way you can kill off areas of interest is just removing contrast. And by having less contrast, your eye won't be as drawn to it. Okay, let's just merge this down. We don't really need it. Oh, thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Edwin, for the kind compliments. I really appreciate that. Hopefully there's something helpful in this stream for you. I'm kind of just streaming, even though I don't usually stream this process because it's not my strength, but I got to do it. So we're going to do it. We're going to show it. Okay. So I'm going to just get back really quick and have a look at what our composition's feeling like. And I feel like we need to get a handle on this a little better. Add a new layer. I want to keep the primary area of interest up here, which you're naturally going to be drawn to anyway because there's a human character there. But let's just not get precious of anything. And I'm just going to also grab a different brush because this one's creating a lot of noise. So I have this other texture brush. Where is it? I have another brush. Oh, we'll just use right here. It's this one. I'm just going to pop this out of this collection here and bring it into down there. We'll put it in here. Okay, guys, this is going to be a very boring video. It might even be a complete and utter disaster. Okay. So for this process, I have my flow of my brush set to kind of low because I want to keep the texture, but I've got my opacity a minimum of 50%. This allows for some blending, but it keeps the amount of details down. I kind of like the feeling of another hill here, actually. I did like that kind of yellowy, warm color. Oops, that's a bit too green here. Got to be careful of getting too warm, though, because that will pull our eye over. So we'll try to get a little more desaturated as we get closer. Keep the edges desaturated largely. I don't know if this is a real rule or anything, but maybe kind of, I like this hill though. Okay, let's just do this. Let's put our opacity way up. I'm gonna grab I'm gonna make a nice light edge on this. That's way too light. Stay here about. Okay, something around there. I'm really not much of a painter, honestly. It's always my greatest struggle. This should probably be way less saturated. It's too saturated. So this should be like something like that. I always have trouble just letting go. So it's a weird color. We're getting like this kind of barfy mix of colors. So this should probably be, let's just see this. Let's bring up its saturation a little bit. Not a huge fan of that color there, but we'll get it sorted. Just checking values right now. Okay. Well, that's too saturated. This is going to be the most boring process. Please. It's going to be awful. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Probably should be darker in here. Just sometimes I try to just squint my eyes a little bit to get myself to stop looking at things so clearly. I've also because I do have a reference ground plane, I am going to neglect it a little bit. I don't want to get too caught up in with what's there and focus a little bit more on what it kind of needs. And also try to fight the tendency to add too much detail too early on. We have a light patch here and like a bit of light here, and there'd probably be a little here. And this, I'll just go like this really quick. We'll just put a little light there. Let's really pop it. And here would be let's just put a lot of light on here. It's kind of like a sunny morning, I suppose, with some low light. Okay. Let's put this tree up here because this tree should be here, at least in the foreground. And then eventually we would have objects or things to break up these tree shapes a little bit, like bushes or grass or something. Now the question is are those things dark or are they light? I don't know. So look, okay. Kind of creates an anchor. I am curious to see what it would feel like if we made everything get super light at the edges. Like if I take, what would I take? One of these brushes. Oops, I just moved one by accident. Fuzzy grass. No, let's just take one of these and let's just grab this color and go what would happen if we made the film dissolve away on the edges completely? Not sure. Hey Sky, no, I don't. I'm really I have no traditional background in any of this stuff. I think it's that's largely why I struggle. Although my mother is quite an experienced painter. She wouldn't call herself a very good painter, but she's very experienced, and I think she's been able to at least teach me a lot of the principles. Now, whether or not those actually stick, that's a different matter. I would not call myself specifically inclined to painting. I struggle with it. I wish I was better at it, honestly. But, whatever. I mostly focused on animations, so my skills with the brush are a little wanting, to say the least. Okay, so this is fine. I think there's something here. This is okay. This is cool if we get dark here, and we may want to increase the area of light here. Let's just see what we've got. We've got a little bit to work with there in the actual physical structure of the landform that we've got here. And if we want, we could potentially get really dark. Well, not really dark, but significantly darker around here somewhere. Oh, we got a layer sitting on top of us. There we go. Okay. So let's just try to go with a general flow and see what we can do. Now, in these paintings here, like we get quite a bit of dark in the background. Oh, geez, my cup is drooping. And way less in the foreground. Like I was saying, is not usually my form of my practice, but I think there's something really cool about it. Just put like a little highlight here. Tone that down a little. And then I think too, I want to be careful of not making everything dark here, but also we don't want to get so light that it's distracting. So if we are to have more light in here, maybe around here somewhere. This is also, you don't zoom in at this stage, so that's a pretty important little tidbit. Don't zoom in. Now, there's something kind of neat about this being so light over here. Even though I'm not sure if it draws our attention or not. I have to sort of play with this. If the scene is predominantly light, dark things will draw our attention, and it's about contrast and difference, I guess, is the real thing. So it's like if your whole scene's black and white and you throw some color in it, the color will draw your attention. If the whole scene's very high key and there's some dark in it, that will kind of pull the eye in. It's mostly, as visual creatures, we tend to be drawn to things that the difference between things more than specific actual things. Just like we feel the difference in temperature more than we feel consistency. Okay. All right, so there's some interesting things here. The other thing, part of this idea is to try to maintain a level of simplicity. And that's something I always really struggle with. I mean, even just look at these trees, the amount of detail in them. While simple compared to a lot of things, is perhaps not as simple as it could be. But who cares? All right, let's just do really quick some background layers. I just want to I want to flesh out a little bit what's going on behind and see kind of what we get. We need some far backgrounds, and I have no idea what those should look or feel like. My usual tendency is to use a lot of ambient or atmospheric haze to give my scenes some space. But what's interesting about I don't know if it's interesting specifically, but in these landscapes, it's not that consistent. Like if you look at this, the pine trees are quite dark. I mean, they're significantly lighter than a lot of other things because there's so much atmospheric haze. You see that they're kind of purple. They're not dark green. These are like warmer colors. So as you get closer, your colors tend to get warmer. So if you look, let's just take this grass, for instance. This grass here is probably similar. So it's kind of got a lot more red in it. It's sitting more in the reds. But as we get over here, or, maybe that's not quite the same, but even these grays will have a little more red to them. As we go here, they'll have more blue. You'll literally see it get more blue. And as we get even further, things will get lighter and cooler. So I think it can be a general rule that we definitely are looking as far as warmth. You usually go from one to the other, but that also depends. Like things usually get cooler as they move further away. Under normal daylight, that rule can change a lot as soon as you're like if the sun is really warm and setting, obviously it won't do that anymore. It'll be a totally different rule. You might have really cool foregrounds because if they're in the shadows, for instance, all this stuff is in the shadows. It's this foreground stuff. This would all be could be really quite cool. And then our warm area might be right here. We can use that to our advantage even to take these certain foreground elements. What is this here? Right. And actually cool them all off. And we can do that. We can experiment with that later. But the first thing I'm just going to try to finish up a little bit of blocking in here to get a sense of what is the land like, because we've never explored it in any one of these paintings I've ever done of this whole film. I've never explored in any finished way what this world looks like. And I think while I want it to have a sensibility of this world we're looking at right now, I also want to combine it with my home where I'm from. This is the same province, but where I'm from, it's a lot more mountainous. So I'm just going to just pull up here to Google.ca. Okay, so we'll just do a quick image search. And I'm going to look up Alberta Kananaskis. Okay, this is where I grew up. This is my home. So we have, where I'm from, we have a mix of the prairies and then lots of mountains. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, like this is super close to my house. Well, it's not super close. This is like 20 minutes away. This, where I'm from, is very mountainous by comparison. I was more in the valleys. I grew up more in the valleys, but I would like to try to find a way to blend the two together. Let me just look up. I'm going to look up one more thing. Here, we'll just like Alberta, as Bragg Creek. Okay, so this is like really close to behind my house, right here. This area. So I just need to find. It's a lot like this. Obviously, this is very big and grand, and we don't want to, at least in my opinion, we don't really want to go there. It's too intense. It's too like epic. But I want to capture a little bit of the elevation is nice, and I think the variety of the land is a little bit better. Something like kind of more like this, which is not it does happen in northern Alberta as well. These kind of things here. You don't get the crazy mountains like this, but you do get the little river valleys and things like that. So I want to try to I'll probably try to mix the two together a bit. So let's just keep going. And I don't know if this method or this process that I'm going through is like official or accurate to anything other than the way I'm working right now. I have no idea. Let's warm that up a little bit. So in these light areas, you would assume this is kind of like grass. The gray areas would most likely be trees, branchy little trees, things like poplars and birch would kind of have this grayish look to it. If it was leafy, it would be greener or redder, which we might do, right? So most of this gray stuff is going to it just doesn't have much foliage on it. But if we want to add foliage to it, again, depending on the season, we want to stay roughly in the same, so we're about here, so we want to stay here roughly. We can add a little bit, it'll be a bit tad lighter. Maybe it would pick up on the sun a lot. But pine trees stay the same year round. They sometimes feel a tad warmer. And then this stuff would get a little darker near the root of the trees. So if these were like stands of trees, they would kind of be light at the top and then they would be sort of dark. I'm not sure. I don't know if I like that color here. Whoops. Just going to let my eraser be really aggressive. Now the question, the million-dollar question is color for sure. Let's pull, since we're using some of this as our color, let's take this and let's grab this blue instead. Whoa, that's really bright. I want to go for more of a gray blue instead of the blue we had. Feels a little nicer. Cool. Okay, we're getting something. I feel like we're getting somewhere. If I were to look at this fairly tiny, I am getting a feeling of that land a little bit. This area is not working quite at all. Here, there's something there that's not working. I almost feel like this maybe should cut right down into the valley and just let that, although it's a little weird. Probably more around her. Let's go here and bring this down. So by not getting too caught up in the specifics of the painting, we can control the design better. I don't like losing all that. We may just want to make this a little brighter. So one way we can do that is just take this, grab a color here, and then just change our percentage and just put that there like that if we don't want to wreck everything. I can push certain areas a little closer to the sky value. Maybe it's like farther away. What is the shortcut key for switching between paintbrush to eraser? So the shortcut for brush, I'm using Photoshop, is B, and then eraser's E. If you have a tablet, obviously you can use like the tip of your pen and just flip it over, and that should switch you right over to an eraser. So B and E. So brush, pretty easy to remember if you're an English speaker. B for brush and E for eraser. Okay. So this is kind of a cool way to work. I don't know if you guys, if you're new and you haven't done this before, you can create a new layer. So I just did it. I kind of might have done it without showing you guys. But if you create a new layer and then you hold the Alt button down and click just by the where the two layers meet on this edge, what you'll do is you'll create an adjustment layer. And what this does, if I can find, where's the object that's affecting? It's here. What it does is, let's say we have this. It makes it so if I'm painting on this layer above, I can only paint on this layer. So let's just grab it here. I won't paint outside of it. If I were to disable this, then now it'll show all my brush stroke outside of it. So this is going to be a cool way to work, and it's non-destructive if you want to work that way. Sometimes I do that if I'm just testing something. And what I can do now too is, if I want to, I can go in here on that bottom layer, and I can just add some more, say like pine trees or something. And they'll inherit that. They'll keep that like blue hazing that I did. So that's kind of it's a fun way to work. So let's do lots of, I kind of forgot how many pine trees were in this world. There. Those look like pine trees. So one other thing we're going to do is, I mean, the pine trees up north are usually pretty small. Where I'm from, they're small too, but they can get very tall. They're scrawny, but they're tall. So I'm going to do the mix of the two. Or these are like sort of, these are sort of more foreground trees. Now, honestly, I think I like the color of this painting here, of this drawing, this photograph, more than I actually like the colors of this Andrew Wyeth painting. There's something a little more compelling about it. It's less muddy, it feels a little more naturalistic. So let's just keep going with this. I'm kind of happy with this feel. I almost like what we've accomplished in a weird way. And the other thing I kind of like is this weird green, this green that's crept in, which is cool. We might want to put a little more of that here and there. Sort of like it's like a greeny, ratty brown color, which I like, but we'll have to be careful with it. We'll have to be conservative with it. But it's kind of nice here. And in here, it's like cooled off as it's in shadow. And for something that's kind of getting into shadow, we probably would add a little more green to it. Or more purple to it, which is kind of, I'm not quite sure what the actual, if you're to add purple to here, like to cool this off, you might get more into this range and desaturated. It's hard to say, I'm not an expert of color, so I don't really know the rules. I know if you're actually in painting for real, what is pure ref for the photos? Pure ref, is that like a reference is that, there's another one I've used before. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but I'm just gonna look this up. Pure ref. Never heard of it before. Oh, cool. Oh, this is a little more robust than the one I was using. I was using this one called, neat. So it's like an overlay. I was using this one, Quadro or Quadro. I don't know how to say it. But it's a similar thing, but it's kind of buggy. So I actually would like to get rid of it. So I'm going to try that Pure Ref program. Thank you for the reference on that. That's awesome. Or thanks for the link on that. That's a great idea. Okay, so the next thing we need to nail is the far background, very far background, which is somewhere in this area here, these kind of grays. But our sky is quite a bit darker. So if I were to take these colors here, what I'd probably do for really far background is cool them off even more and lighten them. That's probably a tad warm. Another trick you can do is just take whatever color you have, and if you have like a sky already painted, just reduce the opacity of it, and possibly cool it off a little bit. This is a little tricky since we're kind of in this like green range. Cooling off would probably more likely go here into the purple, into the reds. it wouldn't go into the oranges because that's kind of warming it up, even though it's a little counterintuitive. You're moving towards purples as you cool off. At least that's my understanding. I could be completely wrong. Not quite sure how big to make this world. Her home in the film is kind of in a river valley. So there's like this descending value, this descending quality to everything. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Patelvic, I'm sorry. You probably suggested it, but I forget everything. I'm the worst. Thank you. I should download it. I never really looked at it close enough to download it. But yes, Patelvic has mentioned it. It's more my bad because I don't tend to. I'll like remember stuff in the moment, and then as soon as I'm not thinking about it anymore, it'll be gone forever. It's also like a bad habit I think for all of us. Maybe not you guys, but definitely for me, is I can get into a way of working, and then I'll just get used to that way and just sort of fall into that pattern. But yeah, thanks for the reminder, Patelvic. I'm glad. Thank you. Sorry, you're right. I've heard of it before. I'm clumsy best here. Okay. Patelvic, do you like it? Do you like using PureRef? I'm assuming you do, because if you've recommended it several times, you must like it. Okay. So I'm going to just fade that off a little bit, because the sky gets brighter over here. So we don't need to be as dark. So pine trees, we're going to have little stands of poplars and stuff. So those would more likely be a bit gray. So gray. Alberta gets so gray. It's actually going to be really dreary. I find spring and late fall in Alberta is just an awful time of year. Everything is so bleak and bland looking. Wears on the soul. Oh, what's also cool too is if you put a layer underneath here, it will automatically become an adjustment layer. Or sorry, like kind of okay, so never mind. It'll become an additional layer and it will respect the alphas. What I want to do here is I think I want to add a little more possibly shadow, like it's blocking the sun a little bit and it's cool in that valley. I see. So Patelvic, you don't paint as much. You don't paint enough to use it as much as some people. Okay. So the sun's really low, so we should have like long shadows. So these guys here, as I'm sort of assuming, we'd have to assume that there could be tree shadows on this stuff here. I don't want to get too intense into that, but you would assume it's mostly going to be skylight, right? Like this isn't going to be a highlighted edge. But if this was like dead grass or whatever, it should be closer to the sky value at the most, like just a bit darker than the sky, but not as bright as these guys here, which are being direct lit by the sun. So we don't want anything like this in there unless we want that hill to be this part to be facing the sun and looking in. I think we could get little spots of that, but we're ultimately suggesting that this moves into like some kind of a valley, kind of like what's going on in here. And you see here, actually, I was just clicking here. When this gray warms up, it gets a bit into the purples. If that dark gray, we cool it off, it goes all the way into the blues. So this would be more in here. Anyways, let's take this and let's warm it up a little more. See what we can do with this. This might be like a really cool place here, down in this corner. Maybe we can throw in a couple of like little birch trees. So here I'm just exploring before I start throwing in too many assets. So this test here in the foreground was to try to get a feel of what the pen and ink trees could be compared to this, like these 3D assets over here, which are drawn pen and ink, but they're on 3D objects. And sort of there's this like in the film, I know stylistically I've made a choice that sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. That the pen and ink, there's cutout. So anything that's like human-made or a puppet will directly interact with will be a paper structure. And then anything that they don't interact with would be, and that is especially something that's in nature, would be more of a painting or some kind of like 2.5D illustration. So this here, we might have some just trees here. I'm just going to paint in some really quick little stuff here. I'll be careful. I don't want to get too crazy. And then probably would have some highlights on here, and we'll just warm this up. So this tree is like kind of hitting the light, just to give us a little something here. So just a nice little, it's above the light. So the shadow from this valley would be casting all down here. So the sun would be just touching these. It would probably be touching these pine trees too. So we could kind of, I suppose, I'm not sure which way would this go if these pine trees were being lit by light. You wouldn't just go lighter because that just makes them kind of cool. They should warm up. I'm just not sure in what direction. Probably, well, we could go both ways because it's right directly opposite. If our sunlight's kind of like a warmish yellow color, oh wait, our sunlight's here. And if our pine trees are over here, it's almost the direct opposite. So we could really go either way to lighten them up. I guess it would just depend on what kind of tree, because some pine trees are quite blue and other pine trees can be quite red. It really depends. But we could get away with either or, I think. I can't quite recall the rule for lightening something up. Probably because it's a complement, it'll fall more into the grays. Oh, sorry, you mentioned adding green or purple into the shadows, but if painting traditional, anything noteworthy there? I'm not sure I'm hoping I understand your question. So there's, if you're interested in the idea of painting, okay, so one thing that so the rule is, this is more of a lighting thing. So if our key light is sort of this color, right? Like let's say it's kind of a yellowy, warm color, right? And we'll just do this for the sake of argument. So anything under really direct sunlight would, if it was a white surface, would have this color. If it was, let's say if it was like a red surface, or let's say it was a purple surface, it wouldn't look fully purple like this. It would kind of be tinted in towards the gray and this a little bit in that sunlight, right? So it would look kind of like that. So anyways, that to be said, the shadowed areas would be picking up only ambient light because the direct light, which is yellow here, would be blocked, right? So essentially anything hidden by this would only be lit by the bluish light of the sky, okay? So this is like, I didn't know this rule forever about shadows. But shadows, I mean, you can make them whatever color you want. They can sometimes get warmer or cooler. But essentially what we have to decide here is that a shadow is only going to have ambient light lighting it. So anything here that's blocked by direct light is going to have more of a bluish or cooler tint, right? So let's just turn this off for a second. So it's hard to tell in this, but if we were to select this color, it's really hard to tell. But this color, because our key light sort of in this scene has a warmth to it, it moves closer to yellow, right? The neutral gray moves closer to yellow. But then in our shadows, it'll move closer to blue because we have an ambient light of blue, an ambient shade of blue over the whole scene. So even if, let's go here and have a look. We'll hide this. This might just take a second. It seems to be a little freaked out. Let's make our light really yellow. So right now it's just barely, it's like slightly tinted. We'll make it super yellow. Wherever there's a shadow that blocks the light 100%, technically there is no light. So if we take both of these guys off, there we go. Oops, I had it off for a second. Technically there's no light, right? So in nature, it doesn't work that way because the sunlight gets diffused all through the air and it's bouncing off water molecules and all kinds of stuff in the air. And so you get this ambient glow of blue. Also, it's bouncing off the ground back into the atmosphere. So you get an ambient blue. So in a computer, what you might add is you would take this ambient light here and add a blue tint to it. And what that's going to do is anything that would have been black or in pure shadow will now have a bluish tint to it because of the color of your sky. If your sky, for whatever reason, let's say it was a crazy sunset or something, was really the ambient shade of it was more red, you would get reddish, like these kinds of shadows. So there, wherever there's no direct light, you're going to get this exact color influence on top of it. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but what that ultimately leads us to when we're painting, let's just undo some of this. What that leads us to when we're painting is that if this light here is yellow, the main light is like this orangey yellow color, and the main ambient shade of our sky or the opposite end is kind of this blue color. If we were to have this green, like for instance, this green here, and technically this green's in shadow, so we would assume that if this green was in this yellowish light, we would move it closer to yellow and bring up its light like this. And this is probably more what the green would look like in pure sunlight. And then the green in deep shadow, let's say it's like this. And technically the ambient shade of this, like if we were to take a blue and add blue to it, which is probably around here somewhere, because it's a direct complement, it's kind of going to push it into the grays. It might go a little bit this way or this way, but it's mostly going to be moved into the grays. It would end up in like this. So wherever the green was facing the sky would kind of be this gray color. And then when we got into like the green being terminated by ambient occlusion where there's no light, we might just go straight into the darks and higher saturation like that. Does that make sense? So your color will be tinted by whatever the color, the light influencing it. And then it will also be tinted by the ambient shade around it. And that'll be the thing that lights it. And that's if you're dealing with like a sunlight and kind of a blue sky, like a prototypical blue sky. Again, for this green ball, if this sky was actually like orange or something, so if we take the sky and we had it like a kind of an orangey color, we wouldn't go gray like that. We would take, let's just do this one more time for demonstration. Like if this was our neutral color here, if this was the neutral color of this green, say it was like that, it's going to look hideous. If that was its neutral color and our ambient sky was like this orange color, we would probably we're going to be closer to here. We're going to be moving towards there. And we won't really desaturate actually because it's not in the opposite realm. It's moving over to here and it might be a little bit lighter because there's like an ambient color in it. I guess we can desaturate a little bit, but we're basically going to be adding this color to that green. And you can see if I lightly do it, what has it done to that color? It's gone from green to like slightly more red. See? And then, if the surface was really reflective, it might go so far as actually reflecting the color of the sky in it. And then if we had like a source light over here that was like a yellow or like more like that. Yeah, it's kind of like global illumination. Exactly. You're kind of faking it. And this is the idea of it. So if this was its light source here, we're going to take this green and we're going to push it closer to the yellows and maybe brighten it up a little bit. There's a bunch of good tutorials online about this kind of stuff. I can't remember all the rules. And now if we had let's say the bottom area, there was like a blue light, here. This is going to adopt a tiny bit of that. And I guess I could sort of find the color by doing like a light bit here. But it's sort of going to shift towards blue very gradually, and it's usually going to gray out. Like it's not going to get more intensely green as it goes through. It's going to gray out a little bit. And where we have zero light, this is just going to get darker. So if really we have no light in the core here, we're just going to get darker. Anyways, I don't know if that helps at all, but that's kind of how it's like the basic dumb version of how I think about it to get my head around it as not being like a very proficient painter. It's sort of the logic I kind of try to apply to the paint while I'm going. So this guy here, being all in shadow, like this part. So if this is sort of the shadowed version, it's probably more like that in neutral light. Maybe it's a bit greener or redder, I don't know. But maybe this here, there's a bit of light on the edge of it because it's getting some sunlight. So I'm gonna add like a little bit more yellow because the sun is kind of this yellow. It's quite gray, but it's a little more yellow. And then I'll just put that on the green just to give me a little highlight in there. So we got this little bit of green highlight. And then here in the deep core of the shadow, I will darken it. And maybe I'll add like a little more blue to it, which ultimately, since the blue is really more, it might push me more red or green, but it really desaturated. I really should go a tad more desaturated for the ambient shade here. So we could do this to darken it up. And then we can really crush down to get the shadow that the tree is casting or something, you know. I'm not perfect at this by any means. And then here, let me just double check our ground. So the tree shadow is sort of like coming over this crest. There's a light patch right here, funny enough, which I didn't like read naturally because I'm kind of seeing the tree in this with bushes all around it. But this is a cool little unexpected thing is there's a lot going, there's a gap in between here, and the light's getting through. Now that may not happen because if we have bushes that are right up against a tree, we may not see that. But it's a neat little accent that I think we can kind of pull into the scene. Okay, and I'm just going to grab some gray off a little bit of this. I don't like that. I kind of messed it up. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so I think your idea about that being global illumination, it kind of is. It's like you're looking at the general ambient shade. And when I'm painting stuff for this kind of treatment, like if I'm doing sort of a 2.5D treatment where I want to be able to add the lighting on top after, usually what I do is all of the assets that I paint that I'm going to be incorporating into the animated environment, those assets, I actually paint them quite neutral. I paint them a lot like, I paint them with ambient occlusion, really. There's a really good tutorial. I'm trying to remember. There's a guy that did a really sweet tutorial on painting lighting, and this is kind of where I learned it. I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing something. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, but I know like there was a logic to what I was doing. But it was exactly this idea of I would paint the general ambient occlusion or ambient shade of something. So like these trees in the foreground, for instance, if you look at them unpainted and uninfluenced like this, they're pretty flat. I have like a little bit of top down, up and down lighting. So like dark areas here and there where I would imagine light from the top would kind of get under everything, or like the other tree here on the right. So we turn off everything except the tree. This, you see I've kind of darkened around these like bottom areas or in pits. And that's kind of like what I would consider sort of the ambient occlusion or like the global illumination pass with no direct light. And then when I add the direct light, I'm kind of putting the highlight in and this like core shadow in. And this is coming from what it would feel like is more the influence of the direct light, if that makes any sense. So this is helpful even if you're, doing 2D and you're not doing 3D at all. It is helpful to paint, especially if you want to create general assets that you want to use in multiple locations throughout your project, is that you paint them with an ambient occlusion essentially, and then when you're ready, you kind of paint them with shading or shadows and stuff in them. Okay, so all that to say, what's happening? I'm kind of into this idea of these trees, a couple of trees down here. This is kind of cool. I like the feeling of this. Feels like there's like a little valley happening. Although I'm not quite sure what color to make them. Like birch trees are so crazy white. However, I'm not sure if I'm capturing that. I might need to put a little more lightness in these trees, especially in these dark areas, to make it stand out a bit more. Okay, so because we're mainly going for feeling here. Also, I have a tendency to over clutter. It's my inclination is to over clutter everything. It's the worst. I can't help myself for some stupid reason. I might grab, while we're here, I'm going to just pull from one of my tree brushes. So I have these nature brushes. Um, those are leaves, plants. I want not rocks. I want tree builder. And I've got some branches and stuff. And these we can just sort of use at the tops of the trees and stuff. These are like pointless details, but it is for a moment. It's kind of helping me get a sense if the lighting on the tree is going to work. I'm just going to lock that down. I'll go back, and I'm just like and I say that because what I'll do now, well, it's like birch trees tend to have the top branches tend to be really black. So these trees, weirdly enough, can get quite dark at the tops, like that. Cool. This probably should be more blues in those darks because it's kind of farther away. So we don't want to get the dark too warm because this tree is supposed to be kind of in the distance a little bit. And like the other thing is like you don't want to be, the thing I run into sometimes is I'm overly logical about what the light should be doing and stuff like that. That's not always helpful because there's a lot of things out of frame that might influence this. Like there could be a giant tree over here leaning that's like blocking light. So if you feel like there's something too cutting through this, like let's say we don't like how straight these lines are, or maybe they're distracting, you could just go like that. There's no reason you can't just do something like that. And it's justified out of frame. In fact, that tends to make things a little more interesting. But we're gonna grab these trees because I have these actual trees stuffed in a file we're gonna take a look at in a second. So I'm gonna darken this out. I want to create my like little spots and lines on these. Okay. So we have a couple birches there. I think we probably need like a couple of little things more because I don't want 2 and then 2. But also we haven't quite figured out what to do with the foreground of this. But I do like the color. Yeah, so sweet. So when painting flat, it gives more control of lights in it. Exactly. But paint directional light just to get a feel for the scene before it goes into animation. Well, the way I'm going to work with this is my directional light, I will apply custom per object for the project, right? So those trees that I started out flat, I might use them all over in After Effects in every scene. But if I need them to like have specific lighting, I'll take those and I'll make a copy of them. And in Photoshop, I'll paint the lighting into them like I just did and bring them back into that scene. You could also do tricks with it. You could use like a bevel effect or other things to get the lighting in After Effects. But if you paint nice and neutral, that means you can only add lighting to it. So, excuse me, sorry. You could get this effect if you were to use a bevel on a tree in After Effects, use like the bevel effect, and then make it so that your shadow side is slightly bluish and your light side is slightly yellow, and you'd get a similar kind of effect. It wouldn't be as nice or detailed or controlled, but you could also then combine that with like a bevel on the luminosity, and that would give you the kind of bumpiness you might be looking for. I don't know if that helps, but let me know if it helps or not, or if you have more questions, just ask. Thanks for asking so many good questions. Oh, geez, what did I do? Okay, so that's my background. I want to add something here because I don't like, one thing I definitely don't like is this just a solid patch of light. I think this needs to be weird. Why is it running so slow? I better save. I haven't saved even once. Hey. I'm thinking here we would have like kind of a little bush or something. It might be what greenish brown like this, or it might be kind of more of a reddy gray, depending on what it is, right? Or it might be a little bit of both. But remember, like we can use, it's not all grass. So that's the other thing is I usually forget that too, is like I might just work in one color all over the place, but there could be sort of this grayish green stuff here. We don't know, right? Like it could be anything. So if we want, we could add like some other colors. And this is really important about when you're, and I suck at this. Like don't do as I do as I say. I'm just kidding. You don't have to listen to me at all. But it is important to add colors break things up and bring, like one of my mom always said is like, she said, take a color. Why is everything running so slow? Take a color from one part of your scene and then bring it into another part of the scene. And it's like an important practice. It can be slightly different shade. Like it doesn't have to be have the same, it just has to have the same hue. It doesn't have to have the same value. What is going on? My computer is running so slow. I'm just going to close this. We'll save that. I may also have too many paintings open. So let's just close some of these. I'll have to come back and fix these later. We're probably, oh my God, my computer is freaking out. No, I don't need to save changes to it. Okay. Those are some trees I might want to bring in later. Not sure. I painted a lot of trees. These are like pine trees, which are slightly redder. Okay, almost done. This one is supposed to be kind of a close-up tree that can feel closer in the shot. I might use that one to balance off this. I might put it like here or something. I don't know. It might not be necessary. I have to be super careful because I always overfill everything. I'm the worst. Okay, so we'll just leave this for now. So let's just get in there and we'll do a bit of the sky really quick before we over detail everything. This here is a little bit, the values might be too samey, hard to say. I could probably, let me just do this really quick again. I might go in here and lighten this up a little bit. We could take some of this ambient color here and add almost this idea of fog. I'm not sure if it's necessary. It feels a bit not separated, but that might actually be a good thing too. It's really hard to tell. We may actually even want to just extend this ground as a different ground a little bit. Bring it up a little like this. Actually, we'll cool it off a little. So let's go a little this way and a little gray. But keep the value a tad lighter. Okay, might help that a bit. We don't know. We may even end up putting a tree there or something. A couple more of these guys, possibly. Not sure. I want to be careful. Again, like I said, I always mess up and put way too much stuff in everything. So for now, we've got, even these trees are really heavy right now. Heavy, and then this we're far from a good painting yet. This is probably too dark. I'm not really sure. I usually, when I am working on stuff, I'll definitely walk away from things quite a few times before I strike the right balance. I'm not sure. I feel like I need something here. I'm not sure if it goes all the way to the top or if it's just something smaller. Could be a dead tree. I'm not even sure what color it should be. I don't want it to have the same colors as the main focal point. Maybe it's just some pine trees. That's another thing we could do, is we could take, like, what would our pine trees? Our pine trees would probably be around here somewhere, a little bluer, maybe grayer this time of year, and we could just put them in here. Might even need to make them a bit darker. Okay, I gotta go soon. I'm getting a phone call, but I just realized it's after 4, so I've got to stop. But I might put a couple trees in here. We don't know. We'll figure it out. These guys might be cool, and if we take them and we add like a little bit of warmth to them with the sunlight here, might be nice to put those in there. I'm not sure. And we may find these two trees here are too close, not close enough together, or maybe they're like that, or maybe they're like that, or maybe this one should be tipped over more. I don't know. We'll figure that out. We're still getting going. Like, I even will just shut them off. It almost looks better without them in some ways. Or maybe they end up super dark in the foreground. Maybe they're like that. But the thing about animation is like this, that's the thing to consider, is like, it's not going to end up a painting. It's going to end up a moving painting. So the camera's going to move. So these two trees here might be a great point of focus to start with, but then as we move past them, they might get really blurry, and then the painting will become more that, or more this like here. And that's the other thing that's hard about doing animation, moving animation, when you're doing painting, like versus a painting. This might make a stronger painting, but once you move in here, what is your framing? And once those trees are gone and this is all you have, what's working for you at this point? So I think it's like you're dealing with these very dynamic environments that don't necessarily, and compositions that don't necessarily hold together super well. So they'll have multiple stages of what is a good composition and what's not. And this is not good here because we have this, that, right? And that's like a really terrible thing. But if the camera's moving, this could happen for a moment. It could look great like this. We might end up with a bit of that for a minute and then that. We just don't know. But you do want to plan. You do want to plan to have like the best combination you can. That might work a bit better like that. Not sure. Okay, I'm going to answer your question, then I have to go. Is it a bit of a sidetrack? How am I managing? So I do think of that the whole time while I paint. So so you might notice I've painted a midground plane, and then I've also painted a background plane. And then I even have like a far background plane. So the way I actually paint to make my layer management better is I actually think in layers while I'm painting. So if this was all After Effects, what I would end up doing with this midground layer is once I'm committed and I'm like, okay, I kind of know what I'm going to do, I would break this up into 3 layers. This would be, one layer would be like this. And then I would do another layer that would be in front. And this would be sort of this layer with some foliage and shadows and stuff here. And then I would do another layer, which is this like light area here. And then this guy here would be another layer. But usually like I will literally work in layers as I go. You'll see here, I didn't quite I merged this together because I know I'm kind of throwing this away in some ways, but I will literally structure the whole thing together with the idea that these being spaced apart will make for a better, it will make for an easy conversion to After Effects. And that's the big difference too. And if you guys are working in After Effects or you're trying to work with other artists, if you start working with illustrators who, if you want to work with a really good illustrator, one of the hard things is that most really competent illustrators don't really know how to work in layers like that, and they won't. And it tends to make for worse paintings. It gets, to me anyways, and again, I'm not trained, but it makes it really hard to be spontaneous and to work organically when you have to think of everything in layers. But it makes it a lot easier when it comes time to build the animation, because if I didn't, imagine I would have to cut these trees out and this out, and I'd have to replace this. I'd have to cut all this stuff out, and then I'd have to find a way to fill in the rest of the painting. So it is pretty important to think in layers. I'm just trying to like play with this cloud. I think this seems already a tad busy. Probably want to go like here. We go a little bit like this. I've never been very good at painting clouds. I still feel like we kind of need some kind of landscape back there somewhere. This would be like, we'll just go 50% of something, probably warmer. Some kind of transition into the hills. And those hills have to get darker as we get over here because the sky's getting darker from left to right. So we sort of have to gradually darken this as well. One thing you can do is just pull a value from here and look at, as you pull it over, it goes from invisible to quite dark. So it does make it a little trickier to paint it. And that's another thing I'll often do is, especially if I'm designing it specifically just for After Effects, is I will draw like really long single value things. Like I would just paint, let's say if for this background piece, I would pick a color like this, or maybe I'd pick a green or whatever, and I'd paint this long piece, And then I would use atmosphere layers of the gradiated sky to build the fade off of the values. I don't know if that makes sense, but okay, so I'm just gonna grab this and I'm just put some like trees over here. There's usually some little dark patches here and there. Cool. Okay. So guys, I gotta stop. I'm very far from finishing this. This is like a long project. But I guess one last note as far as composition is concerned, and like I say, take whatever I say with a grain of salt, because I'm not an expert. But one thing also to remember is that when you have objects, let's like say these foreground objects here, when you have objects like this, you can use high contrast close objects to the camera to counter, like if you like you want your painting to balance out. Like right now we're not balanced, we're pretty weighted over here, which can be okay, right? Like this can be a good thing, especially if you were looking over here. But one thing, if you want to visually balance it, like right now it feels like a little lopsided, has a lot to do with these trees in the foreground. Maybe one is enough. But what you want to do is you can also balance between light and dark. So if we made this side really light and warm and this side really busy, you can also balance it out that way. So you can have a lot of things going on one side and nothing going on the other. And there's something that balances that out. If there's a lot of a little and then a lot of white, and we're sort of doing it here. We have a lot of heavy things over here, but then we have a lot warmer colors over here with bigger, emptier spaces, but bigger areas of contrast, potentially. I'm still working on it, but that will help to balance the whole thing out. These foreground trees, I think largely the problem with them right now is they're quite cool. So I think in the end, we will most likely, I'll just do this really quickly, we could tone them down by using anything we want really to play with them, to make it so they're a little less cool. Like because they're so cool, they demand a lot of attention because they're sitting in quite a warm space. So if we just take some of this color here, we could probably crush them out a little bit, darken them down, just play with the values a little bit. We could do a lot of interesting things to help make them less demanding of our attention. It's the white that really pulls our eye to them. So that's that'll get figured out. No, I think also this tree here should be brighter. So let me just do that super quick while we're talking about it. So I'm just going to go do this really quick and kind of cheat this a little bit. And I will do like an overlay, and I'll do this, and I'll probably warm it up a little bit. So we'll just go like really this and brighten this tree up. Maybe cool that overlay off a little more actually. Let's exit. Actually, let's neutralize it and make it like this because we don't want to influence the color too much. We just want to brighten the tree up. Dead wood is really quite bright, so I think this material will have to be lightened up quite a bit. And that will also help pull it forward. Okay, and I'll shade this down just a bit. And give it a bit of a greenish color. I'll pull in some of this green because the green would be bouncing up from the ground a little bit. There, whatever. It's okay for now. It needs to be lighter, I think. So that's with it being so dark. Maybe it works better dark. I don't know, but I feel like if these foreground objects get too dark, we need to like balance it off somehow. Because right now these guys, the value of this and the value of this guy here are so close that if I squint my eyes, they feel like they could be on the same exact level. If I change its value a little bit, it kind of modifies the way it feels. But that's hard to say. I mean, anyways, stuff to play with. Lots of stuff to be finicky with and play with, and also if you find that something's just causing a problem and not working, you just have to take it out. You can't get precious of your artwork or whatever you created. This might really help sell it. Even though I like the idea of these foreground objects to create depth, they may ultimately just be too distracting, and that can be a problem too. So it's going to have to be, we're going to have to find a balance between what actually helps the scene and that's another good thing about creating layers. Okay, when you mentioned this struggle of designing a still for animation, do you think this workflow would be valid? I use it all the time, and it works for me for everything. I'm not saying my stuff looks amazing, Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. But I find this workflow works really well for me. One reason is too is like you see these like two trees right here, right? Because it's animation, those trees are going to move, right? But I can, for as much trouble as it causes me to like not be able to jump around as rapidly as I want, one thing it does do is it allows me to experiment and maybe put these trees over here, or like put them over here, or put them back over here. I can play with things compositionally because I didn't push it all together. And if this was more of a traditional painting process, I would have to paint away these trees and kind of put them somewhere else. So I like the idea of being able to do this. And additionally, now if I brought this in After Effects, well, aside from those little things, I would have this great layer to put in there to add one extra level of depth that would make you feel like there's something in the middle of that valley. So I think it's a valid workflow. Like I said, I use it all the time. I've done so many projects like this. So yeah, but I gotta go, guys. I'm really sorry. It's 4:30. Almost 4:30. So I gotta split. And thanks for hanging out. Thanks for all the really good questions. Thanks for putting up with this kind of boring stream. But anyways, and I hope you got something out of it. But I'll talk to you guys later.